What's up, Dragon Brood? At the end of the last standard season, we saw that Mono White Aggro started to come on strong, and a lot of people started preferring that as their aggro deck of choice. The question stands though, is it still going to be viable in Kaldheim standard? It's possible. I have a build that might. But before we talk about it, remember to like this video so other people get to see it, hit the subscribe button, and then hit the notification bell so you get notified as I put these other deck lists out, as I'm going to be putting out a lot up until the release of Kaldheim. But for now, let's go take a look at that possible iteration of Mono White Aggro. Now, going into this one, I will tell you the toughest thing about this build is really deciding on what you want your 1-drops to be. Because now we do have a real set of choices, and it's really a matter of which way you tend to lean on your build and how low to the ground you want to be. So I opted to kind of split mine a little bit in this list, which could be bad, but I kind of wanted to hedge my bets in case, till we figure out what the format's going to look like, really. So we're starting with a full set of giant killers. Partly because looking around the format, we're going to have some way for some big angels to exist. We're probably going to have some mono green stuff. It's going to have some big creatures. Gruul's going to have some big creatures. You're also going to be looking at some big giants potentially that people are going to be trying. So all of those things are going to give you plenty of targets for giant killer. I can't imagine you're going to go more than 2 games in a row where you're not going to be able to use this. At the very least, you play it early and then you just use the tap ability to keep your opponent from coming after you with like a Soaring Thought Thief or something, right? Totally reasonable. Then we're playing a couple copies of Alseid of Lifespouting. And the reason we're doing this is sometimes you do want to just give a thing protection from a color so you can just punch through on an attack where they can't block. Maybe sometimes you need to protect something from like a Brazen Borrower. There's a bunch of different situations where this comes up. And you do get some incidental life gain, which isn't a bad thing. Then we have 3 Selfless Savior. This is just kind of more defense against sweepers in some way. Giving you a way to stop your stuff from dying, to shadow the skies, even just combat situations where you don't want to give up a creature. Like, there's a lot of little things this card does. It's actually pretty reasonable for this build. Then the new flavor of the month coming out of Kaldheim is Usher of the Fallen. It's just a 1-mana 2/1. It's just really good. And it has boasts that whenever it attacks, you can pay 1 and a colorless and make a 1/1 white human. So this gives you the options of just like, do you want to spend more mana the next turn? If your opponent has their defenses down, maybe you attack, just make another token. If you're afraid that following turn might be the sweeper, you don't have to dedicate another actual card to the board. If not, then cool, you at least got another creature out of it. So it seems pretty good to just have this in that spot. And it's one of the few things you can play that's a 2 power for 1 mana in white. Now, I will say there is another one also that is the Knight. That's a 2/1. So you can play that in this list if you want. You're going to end up with nowhere to put the counter, really, because there's no other Knights that really fit this list, but it's something to think about if you choose to do it. Luminarch Aspirant. This is probably the best, I don't know, it's hard to say. At least in the 2-mana slot, probably the best white creature just in general. It goes into a ton of decks if you're doing anything aggressive. This is kind of the card you want. It lets you grow creatures big enough in size that you could go to battle with. It puts counters on things, so it makes you a little more resilient to cards like Heartless Act. It really does a whole lot in this deck, for sure. Then we're playing a full set of Hollow Blades. The Season Hollow Blade, great card. The other 2-mana card that I think is probably competing with Aspirant for being one of the best for these builds. It's a 3/1, which is awesome for 2 mana. It can survive nearly everything. And when you get it powered up or equipped or whatever, it just becomes such a nuisance for your opponent to deal with. Which, speaking of, we're playing a full set of Maul of the Skyclaves. This card's good for so many reasons. I mean, getting flying is awesome, getting first strike's awesome, getting +2/+2 is awesome. It equips when it comes into play. You're playing only white, so it's going to be really easy to re-equip it to the next thing if you have to. There's just a lot of things this card does. And it's not even legendary, so you can have multiples in play if you want to. So that's another bonus. Definitely big fans of the card. Playing 4 Luminarch, I was going to say Luminarch Aspirant again. No, we're playing Skyclave Apparition. And this is arguably the best card to come out of that set. When we're talking about Zendikar. Like, it removes so many problem things. Except for huge things like maybe the Great Hinge. This really solves a lot of your problems. Like, you need to get rid of any type of banishing lights or Felidar retreats or whatever, it can deal with those just as well. It can get rid of something like a Lovestruck Beast necessarily. Or even, sometimes you want to just get rid of their Innkeeper before they have a chance to get cards off of it. This is a very versatile card, and like I said, possibly the best card out of Zendikar. If you're playing white, you definitely want to go ahead and play this. And then we're playing a couple copies of Lurrus, mostly because if you look at all the other cards, we have a ton, like half the deck we can recast out of the graveyard with Lurrus, and you do get some lifelink. And this is a big deal too, because there's going to be sometimes you'll have Lurrus, you just equip up them all the Skyclaves, now you're getting 5 life back, plus the opportunity to play something out of the graveyard. Super powerful there when this happens. And then we're playing 2 copies of Sigrid, God Favored. This is just a card we're trying out. Like, it's flash, first strike, protects from gods, which I'm assuming will be a thing. Why not? Speaking of, I have a god deck coming, I think, in the next 2 days. It's in my deck queue. I already have it built. I haven't made the video for it yet, but it's coming, I promise. But this, whenever you play it, you can remove an attacking or blocking creature. So it gives you some different combat tricks, can save a creature you don't necessarily want to die. Maybe a situation where they're going to block with something on the Seasoned Hollowblade, but you don't want to give up a card. Like, it can help with those scenarios. And also the fact that it just has flash, right? You can play it after your opponent sweeps the board or something, play it during their end step, and then you're ready to attack. There's going to be some good situations where maybe you have, say, like Hollowblade or a couple of creatures with a Selfless Savior out there. Your opponent sweeps the board, you sacrifice your Savior, or you discard a card to the Hollowblade. You also play this during their end step, and now you're still ready to attack with either 4 or 5 damage the next turn, so you can keep the pressure up, which is really good with this type of card. So sometimes just it coming into play with flash is going to be just as good as its removal ability. And then finally, we're playing a full set of Basri's Lieutenant. This card, just all around strong. It's a 4/5 for 4, protection from multicolor, which will probably be a thing. There's a lot of sagas that are multicolor. Some of them do target creatures and whatnot. There's a few new spells that are multicolor that people are going to be playing. So that's going to affect some things. There's even some creatures that aren't going to be able to block it that you're going to see being tested out and played with here in the early stages. But the other ability is relevant. You do have stuff like Luminarch Aspirant in the list that are going to be putting counters on things. There's a chance you may still get a couple other creatures out of the deal. So yeah, nothing to complain about there at all. Then, of course, by the way, I want to back up for a second. I will say one of the things that's come up in previous Mono White lists when I've had this is you can get in these situations where I've actually used Aspirant to put a counter. This is dumb, but I've used Aspirant to put a counter on a Selfless Savior. Sacked the Selfless Savior, got a 2/2, replayed it out of the yard because I had a Lurrus, and then just like kept that going. So you're making more creatures and giving something indestructible and attacking. It's actually kind of cool, but kind of dumb. But things like that can happen in this list. All right, then lands, we're not going too crazy. We're only playing 22, but most of our stuff costs 1 or 2 mana. We do have a few things that cost 3 and 4, but we don't want those till way later anyway. We're playing 2 Castle Ardenvale, 3 Faceless Havens, and the rest are Snow Plains. I will say this, like, it's very possible that we need to cut like 1 Basri's Lieutenant to play an additional plains in this list. So if you play this and you are drawing a little light on land, that's the change I would make there. But generally speaking, this is going to give you some consistent attackers just in your land, even if they wipe out your creatures. And if nothing else, you'll be able to use Castle Ardenvale to make some more tokens. So yeah, there's not a ton of changes to this list, but the ones we're making are actually pretty relevant. Where you're talking about adding in those Faceless Havens, being able to play Sigrid as another combat trick, having a better early drop in the 2/1, the Usher that can actually make another token, which is a good play when you're on the play, right? You're attacking with the 2/1 and getting to make a 1/1 the next turn. Then all your options kind of open up the following turn. Now, is it going to be as good as it was for this standard? I don't know. There's a good chance that it's only going to be okay. And then as the format develops, you can kind of tune it to match whatever you need, especially deciding which 1-mana creatures you want to go with. That could be a big deal. But overall, it does look competitive, and some people already have the majority of this deck from playing it in previous formats. So that also makes it easy because you don't need a lot to upgrade the list. Also, remember, if you haven't, please like this video to help it get seen by more people. Then hit the subscribe button and that notification bell so you get notified every time I put a video up, because I'm going to have multiples coming out every day until we get to the release of Kaldheim. Hopefully, there's something for you in this pile of decks. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.